Okay, before we start the video, dear video people, this is not with the podcast, so the volume is not as good. I will talk louder. I realized, looking back at it, that my camera was not focused on me for a majority of this video. And I'm sorry, I don't have one of those things that flip out. I have a mirror behind it, and my glasses aren't on, so I thought it was focused. But halfway through, it is focused, so please bear with me. It annoys me too when a video isn't focused. But yeah, if it bothers you that much, just click on the description for the podcast. Yeah. What is up, Spartans for Christ? Welcome back to the podcast. So if you're new here, hi, welcome. I'm so glad you were able to join us. Since you are new, you have no idea what we're doing. We are going through Youth Used by God in this podcast. So if you are a youth, then stick by, subscribe, to learn about all the different ways God used youth in the Bible. And I will say, I was looking at it like this past week. I should have done it so much earlier, but I was looking at it this past week, preparing for today's podcast, and I realized that a lot of times when you look at the youth used by God, and when you look it up, people only talk about the big people. They talk about David and Esther and Daniel and Samuel and all these big people that everyone knows about already. And I'm not saying that it's not a good thing. I think that you should go through everyone in the Bible, but in this series, we will be going through even the little ones, even the ones that kind of stump you, like okay, how did God even use this person? They're barely mentioned or whatever. We're going to try to go through every single youth. So saying that, if I forget someone, please comment that down below. I want to be able to get everyone in there, and we are going to go from beginning of the Bible to the end of the Bible so that we don't miss anyone. So this is going to take quite a while. But if you were on my video last week, and if you weren't, go check out in one of the corners. I always get messed up. I think it's this one. Go check out that video. See what was on, what we talked about. But if you were there, did you notice I skipped someone? I skipped someone without realizing it. And I was like, okay, well, this week we're going to move on to Esau and Jacob. And I was like, wait, no. We missed someone. Do you know who that is? We skipped over Ishmael. And Ishmael he's not really talked about a lot. He's referred to as the son Abraham wasn't supposed to have. He's like the impatient. He's like the product of impatience, basically. But today we are going to talk about him because he was a teenager. And even though he was a quote-unquote mess up, God still used him, but not in the way you would probably think. So what we're going to do today, I hope you don't mind, but we have a lot of Bible to cover. And so I'm not going to read all of it, but we're going to start out, and I actually do have my Bible today because I didn't want to type it up, all of this. So the first thing I realized when I was going through this was that Ishmael came before Abram became Abraham. And this was just interesting to me because I always thought that everything happened after Abraham became Abraham. But no, at the point where Ishmael is born, Abram is still Abram and is not Abraham. So before we actually get to the Bible, we're going to cover these couple points. So it was before Abram became Abraham. He was born because Sarai got hasty. And we're going to see this in the first passage we read. But basically, I think I said this earlier, but basically Ishmael is a product of impatience. He is a product of doubting the promises of God. So, right off the bat, because of that, you're thinking, oh man, this kid does not have it going well for him so far. But yeah, basically Ishmael is the product because Sarai did not have patience to wait out on God's plan. And another key thing in Ishmael's life is he was kicked out twice away from his father when he was still not even born yet, and when he was a young teenager or a young child. I'm thinking, again, I don't know for sure, so if you do know, comment down below, please. But I'm guessing he was around 13, 14 when he got kicked out the second time. Or even he could be even older than that. It just says he was a young man. So, let's start off with Genesis 16, and we're not going to read all of it. But we're going to read key points. So 16 verses 1 through 3. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had not been able to bear children for him, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, "The Lord has prevented me from having children." Now here's one key thing. Like I said, that Ishmael is a product of Sarai's impatience. God had promised Abraham and Sarah, "You will have a child." And in that, of course, he didn't say you will have a child by this person or that person, but he told Abraham and Sarai, Abram and Sarai, you will have a child, which is meaning that he is not only promising Abram that he will have a child, but that Sarai will have a child. But in this, right here, she's saying, the Lord prevented me. He's prevented me from having children. And there's her impatience. God promised her a child, but she's saying, look, he prevented me. He must have meant something else. And I feel like we do that a lot, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. So she continues, "So go sleep with my servant. Perhaps I have a child through her, or children. Perhaps I can have children through her." So Sarah's like, "I want more than one." And Abram agreed. Of course, he's a man. He agreed with Sarai's proposal. So Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar and gave her to Abram as a wife. So this is one thing. This is just something I found very interesting in this little thing right here. It doesn't say that she took Hagar and gave her to him as a childbearer or as this or as that. It says no. She gave her to Abram as a wife. So now not only is Hagar a servant, but she is now married to the master of the house, which is a pretty big deal. But basically what happens, she gets pregnant. Sarah gets jealous of Hagar, of course, because, us girls, we can get jealous pretty easily sometimes. She gets jealous of Hagar and starts treating her horribly. And Hagar runs away. And the Lord sends an angel. The angel of the Lord found a Hagar. So she's in the wilderness. And she's sitting down next to this well. And God asks her, "Yo, where are you from? Where are you going? Like, what the heck? Where are you going, dude?" And she says, "I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai." And the angel of the Lord said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit to her authority." Then he added, "I will give you more descendants than you can count." Now here's the first instance that Ishmael got kicked out. Obviously, it's his mother getting kicked out, but he is in his mother, and we believe that life begins at conception. So in this case, Hagar and Ishmael are kicked out. And God finds them. And this is one thing we're really going to focus on. God finds them in that place. And if you realize, he makes a promise that he made to Abram, where he said, "I will make your descendants too many to count." Well, here he's going to Hagar and saying, "Look, I will give you more descendants than you can count." So he is giving the same promise to Hagar as he gave to Abraham. And later on we're going to see that the reason he did that was because God said, "Look, it's from another woman, but I still count this man. I still count Ishmael as your son. And because of that, I will bless him on your behalf." So I think that's pretty cool. But basically, the angel continues, "You are now pregnant and will give birth to a son, and you are to name him Ishmael." The only other time I remember this happening is with Jesus, so I think that's pretty cool. "For the Lord has heard your cry of distress. This son of yours will be a wild man, as untamed as a wild donkey. He will raise his fist against everyone, and everyone will be against him. Yes, he will live in open hostility against all his relatives." Thereafter, Hagar had used another name to refer to the Lord who had spoken to her. She said, "You are the God who sees me." So, this is the first thing I really wanted to cover, is the fact that Ishmael, or his mother, gets kicked out and God reaches out. A lot of times when we talk about Ishmael, we talk about him as, like I said so many times, the product of impatience, the child that wasn't part of the promise. Because, Isaac is the promised child, and Ishmael is the forced child. He's the one that they doubted the promise, and now he's a result of this horrible thing. But in here, God doesn't speak to him as if it's like this child wasn't meant to be. Why is he here? Yeah, go into the wilderness. No, God says, look, I'm going to bless him. Look, you're going to have a son, you're going to name him Ishmael, and he's going to have many children. He's going to create his own little thing. And God doesn't dismiss him, even though in our minds, he might be, when we read the story, he might be a mess up. He might be a little glitch in the story. He's that smudge on a pearly white surface that you just want to take out and then it'd be perfect. But no, God sees it as, okay, this isn't what I meant, but I knew this was going to happen. I knew, because God knows everything. But God isn't saying, look, you're the blemish, let me get rid of you. He's saying, look, you weren't part of that necessarily. You weren't necessarily the promise that I gave Abram, but you are still his son. And then it continues. Hagar gave Abram a son, and Abram named him Ishmael, and he was 86 years old. Now, when we continue, the next time we really hear about Ishmael is how many chapters later? We're in 16, 1, 2, 3, 4. We hear about him 5 chapters after. So he's born, and then we don't really hear anything about him. And then in chapter 21, Isaac is born. And this is when we hear about Ishmael again. And it says, but Sarah, their names were changed by now. But Sarah saw Ishmael, the son of Abraham, and her Egyptian servant Hagar, making fun of her son Isaac. So she turned to Abraham and demanded, get rid of the slave woman and her son. He is not going to share the inheritance with my son Isaac. I will not have it. This upset Abraham very much because Ishmael was his son. But God told Abraham, do not be upset over the boy or your servant. Do whatever Sarah tells you, for Isaac is the son through whom your descendants will be counted. So here, God is not hiding from the fact that Ishmael is not the promised child. He's like, look, Isaac is the one I promised you. Isaac is the one where all your descendants will come from. Isaac is the child I told you I would give you. But I will also make a nation of the descendants of Hagar's son, because he is your son as well. So here he's saying, look, you have Isaac. Isaac is your son. He is the one I promised you. But I will also bless Hagar's son. Notice he says Hagar's son. He doesn't say, I will bless your older child, your eldest. He says, I will bless Hagar's son because he is your son as well. And then Abraham got up early the next morning, and he sent her away with their son, and she wandered aimlessly in the wilderness. When the water was gone, she put the boy in the shade, and she said, I don't want to watch the boy die. So she had walked away, and she left Ishmael in the bushes. And God comes to her again. See here, this is what I really want to highlight right here. Both times that Hagar and Ishmael, and especially both times that Ishmael has been kicked out, of course it's technically Hagar, but both times that they've both been kicked out, even though they aren't necessarily part of God's plan, God comes to them and saves them. God comes to them and comforts them. God comes to them and says, like, I see you. And so it continues. God has heard. So the angel comes and says, what's wrong? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying from where he lies. Go to him and comfort him, for I will make a great nation out of his descendants." So here is God saying it yet again. Hey, I'm going to make a great nation out of your son. I'm going to bless your son. Go comfort him. And then it says, then God opened Hagar's eyes, and she saw a well full of water. She quickly filled up her water container and gave it to the boy to drink. And the God was with the boy as he grew up in the wilderness. He became a skillful archer, and he settled in the wilderness of Paran. So, right there, as I said, our topic today is that God still uses the mess ups and the outcasts, and God is still with them. With Ishmael, here is this boy who is born. He's born because his father is waiting on a promise and doesn't have the patience to wait. And he's born into a situation that ultimately wasn't even supposed to happen. And he's cast out, and God brings him back and says, "Look, I have a plan for you. You might not know it yet, but I do have a plan for you." And then what happens? He grows up and he's teasing his brother. I don't know how he was teasing him. Honestly, in my opinion, I don't think siblings ever don't tease. But he's teasing his brother. He gets kicked out again. And even in that, God goes, "Look, I still have a plan for you." And then as he lives out that plan, it says God is with him. God guided him. So even though he was a mess up, even though he was an outcast, even though he was unplanned, God still had a plan for him, and God was with him every step of the way. And then it brings up, again, and there's not much on Ishmael, but in chapter 25, it's the same chapter that it says that his father died. They bring up, which I think is amazing. I think it's awesome that we don't just forget about Ishmael. That's another thing, because God could have ended it with, "I'm going to bless him." Yeah. He moved to Egypt. That's basically it. That's Ishmael. But no, God brings it back when Abraham dies, and he goes, "Look, Abraham died, his son Isaac was there. But this is the account." He's like, "This is Ishmael's life. This is the son of Abraham. These are his descendants." And it talks about the descendants of Ishmael and how he was 137 and he joined his ancestors in death. And basically it says he fulfilled what God said he would. Now, this is the big point that I wanted to bring from all of this, because again, as I said, Ishmael isn't really a big part of the of preachers. They don't really teach on Ishmael. You don't see sermons on Ishmael. I found one sermon on Ishmael. That was it. And I mean, it was great, but you don't really hear about Ishmael, and when you do, you hear that he's the other brother. He's the brother that wasn't meant to be. But in reality, the way I think we need to see it is Ishmael didn't fit into the plan, but God didn't exclude him because of that. Ishmael wasn't part of the promise, yet God didn't say, "You're not part of the promise," and take him out. No, it was God. Ishmael wasn't part of the promise, but God still said, "I am still going to bless you. Still going to use you." Why? Because even though everyone else around you might see you as a mess up, might see you as an unplanned mistake, I see you as someone I can use for my glory. So, how are you feeling today? Do you feel like you are that mess up? You are that unplanned? Because guess what? God still wants to use you. He still wants to be there with you and for you. So yeah, yeah, it doesn't matter what other people say about you. If you're an outcast, if you feel like you don't fit in, God still has a plan for you if you're willing to trust him. If you have a friend who you think really needs to hear this, send it to them. Subscribe down below and hit that bell notification to know when I upload, because it's every other week. So yeah, Thanks for the support, guys. You are so awesome. Check out the SIB, the Saturday in Between over there. I have a cute little video. I will hopefully be posting the same day. And yeah, here's a video YouTube thinks you'll like. Peace out.